This video is sponsored by Squarespace. We're halfway through the 2024 Formula 1 season, which means it's mid-season report time. Let's rank all the drivers from worst to best. I've done my 20. I also polled you lot on Twitter, on YouTube community. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter so you can get involved next time. Out 3,761 of you voted. Let's see how you compare to mine. But let's start with a few special categories, shall we? Because my name's Tommo. Let's talk about it. So far this season, who's nailed the best overtake? I wanted to do a few categories before we jump into the full 20, and we've got some honourable mentions here for sure. We've got Oscar Piastri around the outside of Carlos Sainz in Austria, very good. Lando Norris in Spain, a great scrap with George Russell eventually getting the move done. And talking of Spain, George Russell around the outside of both Lando and Max on the start, honourable mention there. And Yuki Tsunoda, not just once, but twice on Pierre Gasly, and then I think it was Kevin Magnussen, one of the Hasses anyway, in the S's at Suzuka, somewhere you never see overtakes typically, yet he nailed it both times out. But there is only one winner for this, and it is not just because I am biased towards Alex Albon. Okay, yes, he is my favourite, but that move he pulled in Canada, it was opportunistic for sure. The door the opportunity presented itself in changeable conditions, but my goodness, didn't he nail it? A double overtake in some crazy sketchy conditions. Alex Albon at the Wall of Champions getting two moves done. Well done, fella. What about best individual drive? Okay, not over the course of the 12 races we've had so far, but an individual drive performance that really stood out. Plenty of suggestions for this, and of course Max Verstappen has to be in the mentions. Bahrain, absolutely dominant in Bahrain, a dominance we haven't seen really since, and I don't think we'll see again, to be fair. A Silverstone as well for Verstappen. The fact that he was able to almost win that race by pitting at the right time, onto the right tyres, managing that race as well as he could in a car that wasn't by any stretch the quickest car that weekend. Very good, Max. And of course Lewis Hamilton deserves a mention. Of course the vibes were immaculate when he won at Silverstone, but he got ahead of George on pace. I know of course George did retire in the McLarens, maybe could have, maybe should have won it, but Lewis, even on the suboptimal tyre, even on the soft at the end, managed to nurse it home and bring in the dub. Ollie Behrman, Saudi Arabia, have drafted in last minute to replace Carlos Sainz. He's not in the 20, of course. You can't really judge a 12 race mid-season report with one race Ollie Behrman in, but he deserves a mention because he nailed it. P7, 6 points on the board. And what about the racing bulls in Miami? Okay, Yuki Tsunoda had a phenomenal weekend. Great recovery drive in the sprint. Big points on the Sunday. Double points for Yuki Tsunoda. And what about Daniel Ricciardo in the sprint as well? Got P4, held on for dear life with Carlos Sainz breathing down his neck, managed to convert. However, there is one drive that I think stands out to me more than any other. I've gone with Nico Hülkenberg in Austria, holding on to P6 with Checo Perez breathing down his neck right at the end, managing to hold on to that position in a Haas where Kevin was not massively out of sorts, but down the road I think Nico executed a pretty much perfect weekend. Q3 in quali as well, you know, in that Haas, unless things go wrong ahead, that is as good as a win really for them. But where there is a best drive, there must also be a worse. And well, talking of that Austria race, Checo had an absolute stinker then. Logan Sargent, stinker in Canada, crashed into the wall. I mean, there's a few for Sargent, crashed in Japan as well, but I think Canada sticks out as probably his weakest. Sainz also had a stinker in Canada. He didn't have the excuse Charles did with his engine issues, and Sainz ended up having a very lazy spin and taking out Alex Albon as well. Not a good weekend for Carlos. Esteban Ocon in Monaco, taking out his teammate. Lance Stroll, China, I think that deserves a mention because he took no accountability for crashing into the back of Daniel Ricciardo, which I think was pretty embarrassing. But for me, afraid it's back to Checo. Canada out in Q1, caught up in shenanigans with Gasly at the start, barely recovered through the field, barely made any impetus through the race, and then just randomly crashed, hit the wall. Red Bull then told him to come back to the pits with the rear wing half hanging off. Very naughty from Red Bull, very shocking from Checo. But I digress, let's crack on with a rating, starting with mine and then going with yours again. 3,761 of you voted, so thank you very much for being involved. And in P20, my worst driver of the 2024 season so far is Logan Sargent. He's crashed far too many times. Suzuka, Canada, Miami, still much slower than Alex. Sure, Silverstone was a step forward, but it's just been bad. Yeah, of course, you know, he was unfairly removed from his seat for Alex in Australia. I fully believe that, which won't have helped matters, but I still believe that Logan has had ample opportunity to assert himself. And, you know, Williams had every reason to try and make it work with Logan. He's commercially decent, being American. Part of their academy, they wouldn't have to pay a big wage to bring anyone else in, but he's just not shown enough. And I think he's had a really bad season. His time is done, we know it. And hopefully he has a good career in IndyCar, because that sounds like where he's going next. But what about your pick for P20? Well, with a score of 2.4 on average out of 10, it's Checo Perez. Oh, Sergio, you lot have been pretty brutal, to be fair. He's not P20 for me, but he is for you. Now, today's video is, of course, sponsored by Squarespace, and I wanted to take this opportunity to show you a few little things that I've got on order, because there is a new t-shirt design coming, okay, at TOMMO'SRacingGoods.com, my website that is hosted by Squarespace, of course, no question, right? Beautiful website. I think I've done a pretty good job on it, you know, all in their in-house, inbuilt template. Okay, there's thousands of beautiful drag and drop templates, by the way, to make whatever you desire. We've got some black and white TOMMO'S tags. These are a bit off center though. I need to get these reprinted. The first t-shirt was white with a bit of green and red, Castrol homage, bit of TOMMO'S pink going on. Next design, maybe expect a little black and pink number. Okay. If you want to use Squarespace to host your own e-commerce business, sell products like I do, well, you've got flexible payments available, except credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and in eligible countries, you can offer customers options to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. Give it a go. It's free to try. Okay, it's the only when you want to publish your website to the world that you have to pay anything, and when that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off your very first website or domain. P19 for me, Zhou Guanyu. He's been disappointingly slow all year. I was very confident in an assertion I made earlier this year that I felt like he had the potential to be as good as Valtteri Bottas. And after the season opener in Bahrain, P11, I was like, oh, okay, go on, Zhou, cook. And since then, he's just been slow. He's not had many incidents, not many big shunts, but it's just been slow. Valtteri has made him look convincingly second best, way more than he did in their first season as teammates or their second. I've been very disappointed by Zhou Guanyu. I was expecting a lot more from him this season. And as for you lot, well, we are in agreement with an average score of 3.02 out of 10. Zhou Guanyu is also your pick for P19. Not much more to say there. P18 for me, I've gone with Checo. Now, I can't in good faith put him any lower than this because of how he started the season. Okay, in the first 8 events, including sprint races, 2 sprint races, 6 main races, he managed 6 podiums. It was an okay start to the year. It wasn't anything amazing, super special, given where that Red Bull was relative to the field at the very start of the year, but it was okay. Yes, it has absolutely honked in the following events, right, since then, but it didn't start absolutely terribly, and that saves him from being last in my list anyway. P18 for you is Logan Sargent, and wow, the vote was close between him and Zhou. So actually Zhou was 3.01781441111. Sargent was 3.01834618445 when you average it out, okay, to get scored. Very, very close, but you guys went for Logie Sarge in P18, which I don't know about that. I think you're wrong. P17 for me, I've gone with Kevin Magnussen. He's had some good moments, right? 5 P12s, points in Austria and Australia. Hulk's been very clear, okay, and Kevin was absolutely hoovering up penalty points earlier this year, wasn't he? In Saudi, in Miami. It's been another scruffy season for Kevin Magnussen, one where he's looked convincingly second best to his teammate, and a driver of his experience, it's not good enough. We know he's almost guaranteed not going to stay next year. Hopefully, I'd love to see K-Mag in IndyCar as well, actually. K-Mag, Sargent, send them over. Maybe Prema, take them both on for your new IndyCar team, yeah? That sounds good. And P17 for you is also Kevin Magnussen, 4.77 out of 10 on average. P16 for me, I've gone with Lance Stroll. I was very tempted to put Lance actually a bit higher because his performances as of late relative to Fernando have actually been pretty good. He's got a fair chunk of qualifying dubs head to head over Fernando and some decent race results as well. But earlier in the season, there was some clangers. China was embarrassing, man. The way he just took no accountability for that, I think that left a really bad taste in the mouth. As for you guys, you put Valtteri Bottas P16. I'm kind of surprised about that. And actually, your rating is fractionally ahead of Magnussen. P15 for me is Daniel Ricciardo. He's had his decent moments, and his biggest highlight is bigger than K-Mag's biggest highlight, which of course was that P4 in the Miami sprint. But the consistency just really lacking. I rate Hulkenberg over Tsunoda. If we're going to look at teammate comparisons as well, I think Ricciardo, it's 1/3 to a quarter of the time he's looking quicker than Yuki, which is nowhere near enough. Checo is leaving the door wide open for the Red Bull seat, right? That door is open and Daniel will not walk through it. P15 on your end with 4.85 out of 10 is Lance Stroll. I went back through my Chinwags, and Lance has had his fair share of clanger drives so far this year. But again, credit where credit is due, he has seemingly closed that gap somewhat up to Alonso. Is that because Alonso's lost a little bit of motivation? I reckon it's probably a bit more that. Must be difficult for Fernando to really push through this tough moment when last season started so well. But anyway, I digress. We'll get back onto Fernando later. P14, I've gone Esteban Ocon. I think qualifying wise at the start of the year, he was absolutely dunking on Pierre. To be fair though, he was dunking on him head to head. Actually, the relative gap was within 0.2. It was pretty marginal. But that Monaco stink, I know it's one result, but geez, that was so egregious. He really gets points taken off for that from my point of view. And I would also say in this kind of second quarter of the season, Gasly's really stepped up and now started to, I think, slightly outperform Esteban. Maybe that's in line with him announcing his departure as well and Alpine moving their focus towards Pierre. Perhaps that is a factor, but I don't think Esteban's done himself any favours either. P14 for you is Daniel Ricciardo with 4.99 out of 10. Almost bang in the middle, slightly under, not quite. P13 for me is Valtteri Bottas. Now, the driver standards do not tell the story, okay? He was very unfortunate in China, should have been in the points, his car broke down, and he's been consistently quicker than Zhou all season, which, I mean, when you're in a Sauber, which is, I think, quite clearly the worst car, like, what more can he do? We've seen very few mistakes from Valtteri and a lot of bad luck. I think he's driven better overall than Ocon, Ricciardo, Stroll, Magnussen. I know the points don't tell that story, but I really do think his performances have been good, and I think he should be well in line for a seat at Williams. That's why I've rated him so much higher than what you guys have. I'm surprised you put him as low as you did, to be honest. The P13 for you, Esteban Ocon, 5.09 out of 10. Look, a lot of it comes down to how much you weigh on that Monaco incident. You know I rate Esteban. I think he's very, very quick, but he's far from the perfect F1 driver. P12, I've gone with Pierre Gasly. Like I say with Esteban, slow start to the season for Pierre, who was consistently being beaten by Esteban in qualifying, but I would say in this second half of the year, and obviously he managed those 4 consecutive point scoring finishes, and who knows what he would have done in Silverstone without carrying that 50 place penalty and then also breaking down on the outlap. So yeah, you know what, I think Gasly's really come through strong in this second quarter of the season so far. I think P12 is about right for him. P12 for you, Fernando Alonso, 5.78 out of 10. Now, geez, I think mid-season report last year he was second, which, I mean, obviously reflected the performance in that Aston Martin car. It isn't what it was. It's been a bit of a slide, hasn't it? A bit of a drop in performance, but I've put him a bit higher than you guys. P11 for me, Alex Albon. He's had a very middle of the road season. We know that Williams is less peaky than it was, which means it's more consistent. However, they don't have the, certain tracks like, Monza, for example, where they absolutely nail it. Can actually make it more difficult to get into the points. Yeah, I think Alex has done a good job. He's not really done much wrong. The overtake, obviously, that's a highlight. Yeah, it's been good. He's not had these crazy peaks. He's just been very consistent. P11 for you, Pierre Gasly, 6.02 out of 10. He's come through late on, yeah, so I'm happy with that. P10 for me, Fernando Alonso. His season has been kind of the polar opposite of Pierre's, actually. Alonso had a really good start to the year. It's kind of tapered off, and maybe that's in line with Aston Martin's performances getting a bit worse. But it also feels like Stroll's got closer to Fernando only in this second quarter, whereas Fernando was driving at a very, very good level. He holds on to that, okay? I think, again, the recency means he loses points, but actually, if you look at the full 12 races, I think he deserves slap bang in the middle. And for you guys in P10, Alex Albon, 6.61 out of 10 actually. So you've rated him, geez, you've rated him almost one position entirely out of 10, higher than Fernando Alonso, 6.61 to a 5.78. I think Fernando had better peaks than Alex at the start, and he's had worse troughs, but I think it all evens out to them being pretty close, but I would put Fernando ahead of Alex still, to be fair. P9, for me, Yuki Tsunoda. A superb 5-run race from Australia to Monaco, loads of points banked, lovely jubbly, had a worldie in Miami, but then his Bahrain petulance was very, very disappointing. Had his spin in Canada as well, out of a good point scoring position. You know I've got a lot of time for Yuki, you know I've got a lot of love for Yuki, but the peaks and the troughs have very much been there. But your P9, I don't know. I had to double check this because I was like, no way have you rated him this low. P9 for you is Charles Leclerc with 6.96 out of 10. We're going to have words because I'm not going to be putting Charles in my list for a good number of places, right? And when we do, I'll explain why. Because 9th, really? Come on. P8 for me. And you know what, maybe after recent events, this might get equal kind of heat that I'm going to give you about Charles. I'll put Lewis Hamilton. Unreal drive in Silverstone, don't get me wrong, capitalised on the opportunity that presented itself with McLaren having their difficulties. You know, for most of this year, where Mercedes was still kind of missing a bit, still running that old front wing with a weird little thing on it. George was has been pretty consistently out qualifying Lewis, and because of that qualifying delta Lewis has had, it's been more difficult. Even though I believe Lewis has quicker race pace, he's having to fight from further back, and George is doing the damage to him in qualifying. George has been better than Lewis this year. Yes, Silverstone, great result for Lewis, but this is a mid-season report, it's not a one-race report. P8 for you, 7.2 out of 10, is Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki's getting his flowers. I like that, I appreciate that, I respect that. But ahead of Charles Leclerc, are you mad? P7 for me, I've gone George Russell. Great quali, has been qualifying Lewis Hamilton and has brought in some good points, is ahead of Lewis Hamilton on points, and with his retirement in Silverstone, Lewis is still behind him. George has essentially one more non-point scoring finish than Lewis Hamilton, but he still makes these mistakes. Canada, everything he did in qualifying, amazing. And he undid so much of it in the race with those 3 glaring errors. I said it in my George Russell dilemma video, right? Can Mercedes trust him to deliver in those big poignant moments? Yes, of course he converted in Austria when the opportunity presented itself, but will he have too many weeks like Canada? Can he iron those issues out? I'm not convinced. P7 for you is Lewis Hamilton, 7.32 out of 10. Behind George, just like I've rated him behind George, although we'll see how far behind George you've put him. For me, it's just one position. For you, we'll see. P6, in my opinion, this year, so far, is Carlos Sainz. Now, Carlos had a superb start to the year, including, missing that race in Saudi Arabia. Derailed his momentum, you'd think, going into Australia, yet he was able to capitalise on Max's misfortune in Australia and convert the dub. I've put him behind Leclerc, which is obviously different to you guys. Collectively, in terms of what the drivers are doing and what the drivers can control, I do think Leclerc has been stronger than Sainz this year. Just. Not by much, but by enough. And P6 for you is also Carlos Sainz, 7.48 out of 10. So same position as me, but different relative to the teammate. On to P5, and finally, I've gone with Charles Leclerc. Now, clearly, from what you lot have said, you're going to take some convincing here. So hear me out, okay? So Ferrari upgrades they've had to revert them back. Leclerc was running the upgrades and then had to take them off the car, and that certainly inhibited his impact in the race. And obviously then the strategy calls were shocking as well. Tried to gamble by coming in early for the inters and it did not work. Canada was an absolute horror show. from Ferrari's point of view. Charles messed up Austria qualifying, ran wide, which ruined his lap. Outside of that, he's not done much wrong. Like, he's not. He got unreal Monaco win. Charles was top 4 for the first 8 races this season. He was very good at the start of the year, and I don't think the issues that have befallen Charles Leclerc have, broadly speaking, been on him primarily. This car is struggling. It's going between you when you're trying. They literally, sacrificed their Friday practice at Silverstone to basically turn it into a test session, and Charles was the one who was trying out the new bits, and so he ended up being hurt more by them stepping back. I think Charles is holding up his end of the bargain. There is always more a driver can do. To put him as low as you put him 9th, and it's like top 4 for the first 8 races this season. I've got to rep Charles here. I've got to give him his flowers and give him his credit, because I think he deserves it for the way he started this year, particularly. And as for you in 5th and 4th, because this is mad, right? So we've got 3,761 votes. Your drivers in 5th and 4th scored the exact same number on average. Both managed an overall score of 29,571. Exactly the same. For you in P4/5, with the exact same score, is George Russell and Oscar Piastri. I'm putting Piastri in 4 and George in the 5 because I've put Piastri 4th. I've already said my bit on George. As for Oscar, I mean, he's been unlucky. Like, the contact he had with Sainz in Miami, the safety car in Miami, I think that track limit was ridiculous in Austria, in my opinion. In Silverstone, got shafted by strategy. You know what? When I was writing mine, I was half tempted to put him ahead of Norris. I really was. Oscar has really shone. I mean, that quali pace is there now. It's there with Lando. It's completely there. And the race pace, the race management, the calmness, the composure on the radio as well. In a team McLaren that hasn't done a lot of winning in recent years. I said this in my video talking about Lando and McLaren if they're ready for a title fight. I feel like Stallard and Piastri, they're going to cook, and they might cook more. Oscar's done a phenomenal job, and it's only his 2nd year in F1. He's done, 30 races? But for me, he's P4. For you, joint P4/5 with George Russell. So, top 3 time. Initially, I was debating over it quite a lot, because there are 3 drivers left. And, well, I'm sure you can work out who. I gave it a good amount of thought. And then all of a sudden I was like, actually, no, I'm pretty clear on this. And we agree. So we can wrap through these graphics as well. Your 3rd is the same as mine. Your 2nd is the same as mine. Your 1st is the same as mine. So in P3 for both me and for you, it's Lando Norris. Now, of course, has Lando had more opportunities to win that he's been able to convert? Yes. Has some of that been through his own mistakes? Now, can you call, Spain somewhat a mistake, focusing too much on Max, pushing him onto the grass, losing position to George, not being able to get past George? Could he have won that race? Should he have won that race? Probably. Canada was a huge opportunity for Lando, and if an executive decision to come into the pits versus the team telling him to come into the pits if it's destiny, SC, sure. Austria, live to fight another day, go onto the curb. Yes, Max copped the penalty, and I think it was a fair penalty in the eyes of the law. Silverstone was kind of on him, but mainly on the team as well. Lando's been catching a lot of heat, right? And yes, he has missed opportunities. What I think people don't give Lando credit for is he's the one who's getting himself into those opportunities. Yes, of course, he's not always converting them. I think this is part of kind of a learning process for the remainder of this year, and he needs to be ready to go again 25 and actually go for a championship, because it's a bit rough around the edges still. It's his pace, it's his ability on the tyres, it's his quality, it's his talent that's getting himself into that position to even fight Max. I feel like people would rate Lando higher if he was slower and therefore not able to fight Max, and then was just a comfortable 2nd place, rather than actually kind of fighting with Max and buying himself an opportunity to win and then not converting it, For me, Lando Norris P3, for you, Lando Norris P3 as well. Which then means Nico Hülkenberg, for me and for you, is P2, 8.48 out of 10. Now, yesterday, me and Hannah, we walk into town, going over my list, just talking openly, right, my 20 to her. And when I told Han that I was putting Hülkenberg P2, she wasn't having any of it. And the fact that you lot have done it as well, with 8.48 out of 10, we got to rub this in, because the fact that you lot agree with me, I'm chuffed about that, to be honest. Is she asleep? Oh.
Hello.
Hello, wife.
Hiya.
So, just so you know, everyone agreed with me that Hulkenberg is actually second best ahead of Lando Norris. Just so you know. What do you think of that?
Goodbye.
When someone's not got an argument, they will just, you know. He's been superb from Nico this year. It's been absolutely superb. So he held off Checo for P6 in Austria. Great drive, my drive of the year so far, individual drive of the year. P6 in Silverstone as well. Incredible, pitted at the right time, made the right choices when he needed to, smashed it. 5 point scoring finishes to his name, plus 5 P11s. So 5 times this year in 12 races, he's been just outside the points, okay? And he got a sprint P7 as well. So actually 6 point scoring finishes of the year. His only L was a stinker in Bahrain. He had a howler in Bahrain first race of the year. He got that out of the way early doors. The other 11 plus 2 sprints have been c'est magnifique. Taken out in Monaco. Okay, he was caught up in the Magnussen Perez drama. Otherwise, it's been points or P11 every single race in a Haas that, yes, with this upgrade that's gone on the car most recently, that has clearly made the Haas better, clearly improved that car and moved it forward. But for most of the season, it's been fighting out at the back, scrapping in a midfield scrap that's closer than it's ever been, yet he's been able to shine. You know, he's been able to do what I expected someone like Ricciardo to be able to do in a race in balls, but hasn't done that. Nico has shown it is possible. His qualifying is exceptional. You know, well into his 30s, and he's still absolutely on fire over a lap. What has he done wrong apart from Bahrain? Other than that, I mean, he's been incredible. And I think he's maximised the performance of his car more than every single driver in F1 apart from one. Which, of course, as you have voted as well, for P1, Max Verstappen. Shock. Of course it's Max. Obviously. 9.31 out of 10. In many ways, I think it shut up a lot of people, I think, this year, Max Verstappen's performances, because last year, not only was he the best driver, but also that was clearly the best car. And a lot of people would say, oh, he's only fastest because he's got the best car, which always happens, okay? This isn't, Lewis got it all the time, Schumacher got it all the time, Vettel got it all the time. That is what happens when domination happens in this sport. People like to try and chalk it up to the car and not actually give credit to the driver. But now this year, the fact that he's still able to open up that points gap week in, week out, even when that car isn't on lock, even when the team is struggling with setup, he's still finding a way, working with that team, to open up that gap. 84 points now. You know, Silverstone was he had no right to almost win that race. Dominant in Bahrain at the start of the year. We thought it was going to be the same as this year, and that car was, you know, it was exceptional in Bahrain. But also, Max was exceptional in Bahrain. Soaked up the pressure in Imola from Lando. Like, yes, there have been these odd mistakes. Miami when he took out the cone and, you know, chewing up the floor in Silverstone, which, I mean, I think that was more bad luck because of, you know, rain timing and that. But he's very good. And for anyone to beat him, even in 25, right, when I think the convergence will carry on, for Lando and McLaren to beat him in their current phase, Lando and McLaren don't have a chance. I'm sorry, they don't. Max is still the best. He's still the yardstick. He's still the benchmark. And second half of the year, good luck. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. As always, what's the biggest one I got wrong? What's the biggest one that you got wrong and you don't actually agree with? Maybe you've rethought. How did you put Leclerc P9? I still don't understand that. Anyway, don't forget to like the video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want to see more videos just like this. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.